particle board core, melamine, etch tape, done. Then you have the 5-piece doors where you have a frame and you have a floating piece in the middle. So when you build a door that is a 5-piece frame, usually it's made out of lumber or wood, depends on what the species is. We all know that we have dimensional movements and you have all these shapes and everything else. So there's a special product which is a spacer that we put into the V to allow the centerpiece movement, dimensional movement, because as we know the difference between summer, winter and so on, moisture, wood moves. But where you have to be careful when you look at the door, the most popular door today, all kitchens, MDF. Here's what I don't like about MDF. MDF is basically medium density material. Problem with MDF is that it tends to absorb a lot of moisture. Lumber and there's acrylics today, there's glass, there's aluminum and so on, they're not so affected by material. So whenever you build anything or you have something, cost effective wise, MDF is the most practical. But again, it has to be a quality MDF because most doors are painted. And if you're using MDF, which has a porosity factor, which is a less expensive one, it will look very nice initially, but as it moves, it's going to come out in the wash. So, if you put the one with the dowels or with the screws, you have to be careful what type of screws you use on particle board versus lumber versus MDF. What people do with a Logica is basically, I'm going to turn it around this way and hopefully you can see. That's what makes. If you look at this, right now it's in the open position. Since we know that center to center is identical, basically you push it in very lightly, you close the cover, it expands the individual pins, and the pins are digging into the material itself. The advantage of the Logica is that one side is plastic and the other side is metal with some teeth into it. A lot of the other ones are basically plastic. So what happens is you close it up, it expands, but in 2-3 years, especially if there's grandkids or teenagers living at home, the doors tend to move about. When you close this one, did you take a picture to show how it's closed now?
Yeah.
Now take a look at it. I don't know if you can see it, but what it does, it forces it open, and now it grabs. The advantage of this is that if you have a problem, you don't need a screwdriver or anything, you just undo it, you're done with. The other advantage, if you're a manufacturer, a lot of people today manufacture the product on CNC and so on, and it comes from different places. So they bring everything in, assemble the units, put the hinges in, make sure it works, unclip it, send it to the finisher, because most shops today, especially the smaller ones, don't do their own finish. Today you go to shops that just do finishing. So when you order a kitchen, very rarely it's made in the same place, and a lot of the kitchens today and cabinets are sold by dealers that represent other large manufacturers. There's two principal hinges. So if somebody comes to you and says, I want a regular hinge. A regular hinge in the trade called self-closing hinge. A self-closing hinge, let me find one, which they're not that common. This is, sorry. Okay, so now we get to the hinge and we're looking at what hinge we're going to go with. So we have an option. Option number one, which is the most cost-effective, where a lot of people go for it, is what we call a self-closing hinge. So a self-closing hinge, as you bring the door closer, it just goes click, and it's a self-closing hinge. Very popular, very nice, and
Very expensive.
inexpensive compared to the rest. When you're looking at the new likes, we have what we call a soft close hinge. So I'm going to do it again, and I'll try to be very steady, because I was warned if I'm not, he's going to staple it up. Ready? Yeah?
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
That's beautiful.
Okay, so basically now when we're looking at soft close, the future of hardware is going to be soft close. There's a few reasons for it. Reason number one, when you have a self-closing hinge, you know, somebody's closes the top. Sir, the kitchen you made me is no good. In the meantime, the teenager is upset. So that's what happened when they do the swinging on the door. Very common. So whenever I'm called for warranty, I have to look at it. So the first time usually we would go and we say, okay, here's some other hinges, go ahead, replace it. I had one customer actually here in Whitby called me twice, and he's a personal friend. So the first time I said, here you go, change it. He called me back and he says, Sam, okay, here we go. The third time he called me, I said, where did you install it? Well, it was installed in a home where some children with difficulties were living, and that was a swing. I didn't replace it anymore. Because you have to set a limit of where you go. In normal wear and tear, the average person will never, ever wear out a hinge, because the tests, in order to get your certificate, are going through automatic machines, and you know how testing is done. So now when we're looking at soft close, in the business, there is basically, I'm talking about what I sell. There's more, so I don't want to go there. The infinity hinge, this one, the soft close mechanism is in the arm. So it's basically a cylinder which is filled with gel, and you open it up, and if you look at that unit on top right here, this is another type of soft close mechanism. So if you were going to go and build something like this, don't waste your money and don't buy soft close hinges. Buy self-closing hinges, because you are going to put a lift on it, and the lift is going to give you the soft close, and the lift is going to give you maintaining the arms there. So if it's a small door, you can get away with one. If not, you put two. No big deal. The second method, this is a Salici method. Just a point in history, soft close hinges really into mass production, because the old days of soft close, and I'm sure all of you have seen it, used to be on the gable, on the top, a small little finger. It's called lipstick in the trade, and basically when you close the door, it created soft close. Today they're combining everything. If we look at this on the side, the system of Salici is like a clutch in a car. What happened is, inside this part, in this, you have basically plates, which has a lubricant in between. So what happens is when you close it, it slowly, with friction, slows down the soft close. So we have one in the arm, and we have one in the clutch. The difference between the two, the diameter of the cup is identical. But really, with the Salici, the biggest mistake that people are doing is, if you don't drill the depth for the cup sufficiently deep enough, what happens is you're squeezing now the bottom of the clutch. It's not working. Sorry, it's garbage. Most people don't look at the really what's the minimum depth and so on and so forth. So you have to be careful when you're designing your doors and everything else. If you have a profile and you go to a certain depth, you don't want it coming out on the side. And it's the oops door. You know, oops doors is not nice. But really what happens is it's a very reliable system. So both of these systems are working. I'm quickly going to tell you one difference between the Bloom and this. Bloom soft close happens to be in the cup. If any one of you have Bloom hinges, which are soft close, you're going to go in and you're going to see a small little piece inside, and that is on-off for the soft close. It's built into it. The problem with a lot of soft close hinges is that if you have a small door versus a larger door, the trick is that some people say, no, you have to buy both hinges the same, but you can only use one soft close because the door is too light, so you're paying for a soft close hinge, but in reality you only use one. So you have to look at where the saving is. So this system and this system doesn't make a difference what the door is, because if you really look at it and you close it without any weight, it closes. It's easy. Now when we're looking, any questions about hinges? Let me just quickly name a few hinges. So we have the standard is 110 degrees full overlay. Then you're looking at inset, half inset, 45 degrees, 165 degrees, blah, 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 everything is there. Basically, it's no longer one hinge that does it all, it just doesn't exist because the shape of the cabinets, the shape of everything else. One hinge, which even if you're going to do Lazy Susan, everybody knows what Lazy Susan. Usually there's two types of Lazy Susans if we're talking about corner cabinets. There's a full round one where you have a Lazy Susan which would be rounded, and then you have one for the upper. The upper one is usually 18-inch round and it's done. The bottom one usually is the most popular Lazy Susan today, which is a very inexpensive method to go, is called the kidney shape, meaning that it has a slice of pizza cut out of the pizza, the two doors go in, and the hinge goes inside. So you put a soft close on the gable, but between the two doors, it cannot be soft close. So, can you take this one? The beauty of this hinge now, this way here. This is a type of hinge. I went too fast. Okay, in the old days, what they used to do, and I'm sure you've seen it in old kitchens, they used to use a piano hinge in between the two doors. The problem with a piano hinge, it's a very effective way of doing it, but you always see that metal strip that doesn't give you that appearance, the decorative look that you want. But if you're going into a rough neighborhood, that's what you're going to put in. Now, piano hinges come in coils or in length, and they come in different widths. So it depends on the thickness of your door. That's how you determine which piano hinge you use. Now they're using this hinge. So basically you would put, depends on the standard size of the door in height, you'll put this hinge. The beauty of it is, there it is. And I'm not lifting it, so I'm not in trouble. The nice part of that config is that you use the same machine to drill the doors. So again, when you have these two doors, one will have a plate, and usually In the infinity case, most doors are 3/4 inch thick. You're going to use a 0mm plate. Gable depends what you have. The other side you're going to drill the cap. And so basically when you're closing the door, the soft close will bring the door in, and the other one is basically without a spring. It would be self-locking into position.